tonight, baby. So go ahead and do your thing. I can't stop you, baby. I can't stop you, baby.
Yo, I'm sorry. That track right there is too hot, Mr. Earl. That track right there is good. I love it. Well, welcome to Rick's Room. Happy Wednesday, everyone. I'm your host, Mr. Rick. You are here in the room on IntellectualRadio.com, an iHeartRadio station. Thanks for stopping by for the evening. We appreciate you hanging out with us for the next hour. I know daylight savings time and Mercury retrograde has got everybody all twisted. So if you are still on your correct calendar, it is just a little bit past 8 o'clock here in the Shy, and we appreciate you hanging out with us. If this is your first time hanging out in the room, I appreciate it. Welcome. We kick back, have adult conversations, confront stereotypes about current events or whatever else may come up. I just ask that you remain respectful. But if you've been here before, this is your return visit. Thanks for swinging back by. You know the deal. Go ahead and grab your adult beverage. Get comfortable on a chair, couch, love seat, whatever, on the floor. Just stay off my bed. And we're going to have a great conversation this evening. You can find us here live every Wednesday night at IntellectualRadio.com, an iHeartRadio station, as well as on iTunes. Shout out to the IR Hump Day crew here at IR Radio. We're streaming live on Facebook. Everybody say, hey, Facebook. Hey. We also got live stream on YouTube. And if you happen to miss any of these live shows, you can always log in to download iHeartRadio or iTunes and check out Intellectual Radio Talk. Look under the podcast section and we'll be there. You can find a list of all of the other hosts as well within the iHeartRadio family. We definitely encourage you to participate in the conversation tonight. So if you want to give us a call and talk to the wonderful panel that I have here this evening, give us a call. You see the number right up there. It's 708-223-8953. Feel free to post your comments on the live video as well so we can discuss maybe any comments or concerns or questions that may come up that you want to talk about and have read aloud as well. I want to welcome my guest that I have this Wednesday as we're talking about. So, I took a week off last week and I forgot that this is the second Wednesday of March. So this is technically, dear Black people, we do have women in ministry. We have women in ministry, and in celebration of Women's History Month, we're going to talk to three ladies who have ministerial positions and probably face the same challenges, if not additional challenges, that are faced by women every day in every other profession as well. So I'm going to start by introducing and saying hello to, now I said Reverend Karen, but she said we're just going with Karen today. I think that was what we were talking about. But listen, how are you?
I am well. Thanks for having me.
Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I am a minister of the gospel of Jesus Christ, unashamedly, unapologetically. I've been in ministry since about 2001. I am a member of New Garden Missionary Baptist Church, and God has also entrusted me with the Woman of God's Design Ministry.
Nice. So you got your own ministry outside of being in a position. So that's kind of like for those of you that may be tuning in and don't know much about what the ministerial positions look like or ministry, that's like having your own business outside of your job. Basically is what that's like. And all three of these ladies actually have their own organizations outside of. We're going to talk a little bit about that. But thank you so much, Karen, for joining us today. I really appreciate it. And now I have Miss Reverend Erica Nikki Bailey. So Erica Bailey, what are we going with today?
It will be Reverend Erica today. I
Reverend
wear a
Erica.
couple of different hats. Yes, I'm Reverend Erica, and I'm actually the First Lady of St. Stephen AME Church on the west side of Chicago.
West side.
Yes, I'm First Lady. I am an ordained licensed minister as well. So I wear two different hats. So in addition to that, my husband and I have been in the ministry for 20 plus years, and we're in the itinerant ministry, which means that we're subject to many, many moves. So this is our fifth move. And so we're excited to be on the west side of Chicago. Outside of the church's involvement, I also have a ministry called I Survive Ministry, which serves many, many purposes. And primarily mental illness is what our primary goal. And so we also deal with some domestic violence and teen pregnancy. So just a whole plethora of issues that we take care of in dealing with I Survive Ministries. We can be found at isurviveministries.org.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. And again, another side business hustle as well in ministry. I just want to interpret so people understand what that's like for those of you that might not be involved in religion. But
that's funny.
But I appreciate you being here. Thank you so much, Reverend Erica. And then we have now Lisa Marie, but I'm going to go with just to introduce to y'all, Reverend Lisa Marie is here with us on the panel. How are you doing this evening?
Hi, I'm doing well.
Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I've been in ministry for over 20 years now. I pastored up until 2015, and I also have a ministry called Daughters of the King Ministry, in which we minister to women in domestic violence shelter.
Gotcha. Well, look, like I said, we have women in ministry. We have women running their own organizations and businesses as well, and they deal with as some of the ladies who might be watching and participating, some of the very same things that you may go through. And fellas, if you're tuning in and you're watching, understand what women are going through and the history and historical impacts that are being made in religion and society. We were going to try to get some representation from Judaism as well as the Muslim faith, but I didn't quite see anyone jumping to the front of the line for that one. So maybe they didn't catch up as much as Christianity has. I don't know. We'll see. But let's start the conversation, ladies, with before I do, I want to first say cheers to you all. Thank you so much for joining with us. Yes, we just have a little Prosecco, a little sparkling cheers for the Wednesday evening. We've made it halfway through the week. This show is being brought to you in part by A Shakur Boutique, offering 20% off of your total purchase still by joining the mailing list. Check out all of the latest fashion options at www.shopashakurboutique.com. As well as, speaking of women in positions in Women's History Month, we have a lot of, and I'm grateful for all of my female sponsors. Tonight, DLP Serenity Travel is sponsoring the show. If you're looking for a getaway and can't find the time to plan a vacation, as y'all know, I've been saying it. I've been trying to get my vacation plan for my partner's birthday, and it just has not come to fruition yet. And I keep reaching out to. I'm going to reach out to DLP Serenity Travel again. I tried it once before, but we're going to do it again. You all should too. Check out DLP Serenity Travel and get your vacation planning taken care of. Planning trips both domestic and international, and even cruises. DLP Serenity Travel can get you ready for your next getaway. Contact DLP Serenity Travel by visiting their website at www.dlpserenitytravel.com. Give Danella Patterson a call directly at 773-678-4161 to schedule a consultation. That's DLP Serenity Travel, where it's all about you. All right. So as I mentioned, like several industries and professions, women face several challenges just for being a woman. And I'm sure it's no different in the religious culture and faith. So we're going to talk a little bit about some of those obstacles, some of those struggles. And again, like I said, the strides and the impacts that are being made in religion. You all have been in ministry for years, so you've had a lot of experiences. You've seen a lot of things. Let me ask you, how receptive was maybe your congregation, like when you first got started out, like when you first got involved in ministry, which it was probably around early 2000-ish, prior to maybe just a little later. I'm sure that was a turn of the century for a lot of thinking. What was it like for you when you were getting involved in ministry at that time?
Well, it was interesting for me. If I can start out, the interesting thing was that my husband went into ministry first. And so then as he began to pastor for many years, I was first lady of the church. And so for a long time, I was known as Sister Bailey. And that was a transition because I was really young when we first went into the ministry, and I was feeling my way around and learning how to serve the people while trying to be true to who I was. So then when I went into the ministry myself, and then to transition from being Sister Bailey to Reverend Bailey, that presented its own challenges. Now, who are you? The role itself changed. As Sister Bailey, as the first lady of the church, you're more of a caretaker, and you're there to kind of mother the church. As Reverend Bailey, my role changed. I moved to more of the administrative type role. And so there was a difference. And so with that sometimes it does bring a greater responsibility, but then a somewhat of a perceived power. And so I think that there was a little bit of kickback in terms of, wait, I think we like you better as sweet first lady, as opposed to, wait, who's this authoritarian, or is there an authority that comes with this position? Particularly with men. Some men may have a problem accepting authority. Well, some men have a problem accepting authority from women figures, especially in churches that have traditionally been led by male figures. So that's been my experience. Now, in the long run, and eventually as the church has progressed, and not just our immediate local church, I'm saying as the church as a whole has progressed, we've seen some progression within the church. And so now that we have moved several times, the church that we're in now, they've only known me as Reverend Erica. They've never known me as Sister Bailey. And so that makes that transition easier. But when I first started out, there was a difference between Sister Bailey and now Reverend Erica. Wait a minute, we have to now call you Reverend, and then what does all that entail? So,
Was it a struggle for anyone else?
Well, for me, it wasn't a struggle. I was raised and brought up in a non-traditional Baptist church where we always had women ministers against what was the norm for the Baptist church. So we always had women who were part of leadership, women who preached, women who unashamedly said, no, just because a woman, I'm not automatically a missionary. I'm not automatically an evangelist. I am a minister of the gospel of Jesus Christ. And they stood strong in that. My grandmother being one of those women who, during her time, that was just unheard of for a woman to say in the church, no, I'm not going to sit over here on the motherboard with my nice hat on, but I am a preacher.
Because the mothers do have nice hats on.
Right. So it was very different for me. And once I became part of the ministerial team and then being sent out to minister to other churches and interacting with other brothers in the ministry, it was not so welcome.
Sure.
So that's where most of the opposition has always come from me outside of my immediate congregation.
Because the church that you were in was kind of diverse already. Now, do you find that, when you got started out, was it like, I can imagine having to step in the position with other authoritative figures. Did you find yourself having to utilize, and I'm pretty sure you did, but let's talk about it, sharing specific, like always having to go to a specific verse in the Bible just for like proving like a historical figure in the Bible to say women have been involved in this role before? I don't know, Lisa Marie, if you've had to.
I'd say first starting out, I did, because people always bring up the scripture in Timothy about, with Paul saying that, women aren't permitted to speak, and not really understanding, the context of the scripture, that Paul was really dismantling some bad theology. He was correcting bad theology. So, and then always having to prove, well, Deborah was in the Bible. But I think after a while it changed. And it wasn't really so much people that were in my church that did that. It was more so people on the outside when they heard that I was a minister. So I got it a lot, not inside the church, but actually outside the church. So people that really wasn't even really well versed in scriptures, that would come at me with that. So,
another thing, if I could piggyback off of Reverend Lisa's comments, it's probably safe to say that she took more heat than I took, because she served in the role of pastor. There's a difference between associate minister and pastor.
Now, and talk to me a little bit about that, so that I kind of have an understanding of why that's there, what the difference is there.
I have a buffer a little bit, because the pastor is my husband and he's a male figure. Reverend Lisa was a pastor, and so with her being in the pastor position as a female, she's going to get a lot of heat. There's, like I said, for her to be in a position that's traditionally been filled by a male, that's different. I'm safer, so to speak, as an associate minister. Yes. People can hear my voice more as an associate minister because I'm not the head person in charge, so to speak. And so I'm safer. With her having the calling on her life to have been a pastor, that really puts a target on her back, so to speak.
What was there?
Her front.
Right.
Exactly. Yes.
Well, for me, I guess it was a different situation because I was pastoring. It was a Newark church. So my brother started the church. So I was already in there working in the church. And a lot of the people that were in the church it was either like their first time in the church, or we had family, there was friends. So it was a different environment. Mm-hmm. And so it made it easier. That was one thing that I didn't really have to worry about, was pastoring the people. They were really receptive to me and to the word, and even my age, because I was younger. Typically, especially in the denomination that I was in before, the average age was 64.
Oh, wow. So you had a lot to deal with.
So when I started out in ministry, I was in my early 20s, and pastoring like late 20s, early 30s. So I had the age dynamic going on as well. But the people in the church were really just receptive and wanted to hear the word of God. Mm-hmm. Now, that's not always the case,
Yeah.
because I've had colleagues that people told, like bishops and presiding elders, that they didn't want them there, not because they couldn't preach, not because it was a good word, but because they were female.
Hmm.
And what was interesting was that the majority of the people that said they didn't want the women were women.
Yeah.
Did you? So
Yeah.
we had a show not too long ago where we talked about. It was specifically around the title of the show was "The Guest Is Not Always Right," but we were talking about how in the hospitality field, specifically in the restaurant hospitality field, that there's a lot of, how shall we say, maybe some mild aggression between and amongst women, specifically amongst black women. Like black women were judged their black female server and put them through, a treacherous experience as their server. Do you all get the same type of, I guess, obstacles from women as well as having to deal with men? Like, what is that like?
Thankfully, I have not had that experience. The opposition that I felt or received has always been from men. Always been from men. I've been asked to speak at churches and get there. No, you can't speak from the pulpit. You have to stand down here. And it's always older men. Women are very receptive. Women have received the ministry wholeheartedly. I've never had any opposition with other women in ministry.
Funny you should bring that up, because you helped me think. Thank you for that segue, because the next question that I really kind of had about, when you're in your position, Christianity, we'd like to believe, is a religion that is progressive and is moving forward, but because it is religion, there still tends to be some, historical traditions that are held on to, specifically, that women not speaking or not holding office. And, again, this is what we're talking about today. And if you want to chime in, go ahead and continue to comment here on Facebook. I see a couple of you logged in and watching us. Thank you so much. Give us a call. Also, 708-223-8953 is the number to dial to speak to myself or any of these wonderful women who are in their positions. When you're at a church now, I want to say I have the luxury of attending a great dynamic church that has, not traditional Baptist, if you will, ideology and theology. West Point Missionary Baptist Church. Shout out to West Point, out in the South Side of Cottage Grove. But I've been with my pastor, Pastor Dr. L. Bernard Jakes. For those of you that aren't Christian or don't follow, this is what we do. This is what we do. You know what I mean? But we've been to churches where he's had to instill correctiveness about his organization, his church, visiting their church. How do you tackle that? How do you deal with going to a place where your responsibility, your job right there is to deliver the word? You're the minister for the speaker of that day or that event, and it's almost that you don't speak from the pulpit, you speak from down here. Like, how do you deal with that?
I take it from the perspective of, does it matter where you give the word at, or is doing the word more important? You could give me a microphone and I can stand on the street.
Some people do it. Some people do it.
Yeah, they do it.
As long as the word is going forth. I mean, sometimes it's a little disheartening that even in this day and time that we still have to deal with that. But for me, it's more important that the message that God has given me to deliver to his people, regardless as to position in the room, as long as I'm in the room.
I can see that.
I agree. Yeah, although I haven't had that experience where they say, okay, you can't stand in the pulpit. I agree with you wholeheartedly. It's not that serious to me. It's not that serious. I think it's all about your approach. As long as I can connect with the people, that's my goal. So it doesn't matter where you tell me that or where you suggest that I should stand. I'm good with that. Oftentimes, my desire is to be approachable to the people anyway. So if you allow me to stand closer, that's all the more better for me anyway, and for the people.
Yeah, I mean, I agree as well that it's not important where you stand, but just that the word goes forth. And that's what's most important. I haven't had that experience, but what I do, especially going in some of the Baptist churches that I've been asked to preach at, I wait to be asked up.
She's sweet.
No, I do. But the one thing that my mother taught me, she said, it's better to be asked up than to be asked down.
Oh,
absolutely.
That makes sense.
So it's not about me, it's about me representing God and getting the glory. So whatever your tradition is, whatever it is that you know, what you're doing, I want to be respectful of that. And so I usually wait, you know, but I've never had that, you know, issue. They'll always be like, why aren't you coming up? Why don't you come up? It's like, well, it's like, I don't know. Now that was early on in my ministry. Now that's really not the case, but yeah, early on, that's what I did. So, but yeah, luckily I never ran across that.
Sure.
Are you all seeing that women are you know, progressing more in holding leadership positions, or even having an interest or speaking out or accepting that calling that, you know, that they may have to address or to be a part of that position?
I believe that I do see more women entering into the ministry, and feel that they should be there. You know, whereas probably 20 so years ago, it wasn't as frequent as it is now. You know, now you can see, you know, like classes of women, you know, like it's all women, like even some men aren't in the classes entering into ministry to be ordained. So I think it really it's changed.
My sister is a pastor in Peoria, Illinois. And when she entered the ministry, she knew that was her call. She said, I am not going to be an associate minister. That is not the call that God has placed on my life. My call is to be a head pastor, and that's all there is to it. And so she did what she had to do. She went to seminary. She went through the 4-year training program that the Methodist Church requires for you to do. She earned her stripes. She put in all the work, and she is a dynamic pastor. She's a dynamic preacher, but she pretty much says, this is what God has called me to do. I have studied to show myself approved. And she doesn't take much stuff from either male or female counterparts. I mean,
Really?
She knows that God has called her to be a leader, and that's all there is to it. And what she says to me, you could be an associate minister for the rest of your life. I know that's not what God has called me to do. And so she's a year older than I am, but she's very determined. This is who I am. I will stand up and take my position and take my authority in what God has called me to do. So yeah, she's very certain in who she is, and won't shy back for anyone. So yeah.
Well, you know, you luxury of having a sister and you know, family that have been females involved in ministry, women involved in ministry. At least, Maria, have you had women like? I'm curious to know, like, what your family, how supportive your family has been, and if you've had to even tackle this within your own family.
Well, I haven't. Well, see, my first pastor was a female. So I grew up never really thinking that women shouldn't be in ministry, because for the first like 9-10 years of my life, my pastor was a female. So like when we had sing songs like, you know, somebody prayed for me and they say the preacher, I would always say she.
Wow.
You know, and so when people would try to correct me, you know, I'd be like, no, my pastor is a woman. So, and she prays for me, you know, and I would keep going. So I never kind of grew up thinking that women shouldn't be. I've always thought that women should be. So when I was called into the ministry, it was really kind of like not a question of like, because I'm a female, I shouldn't be in the ministry, because that's what I saw growing up. So yeah.
I want you to know what she wanted to do was give us a hair flip. Like she wanted to say, "Hey, I say she," and give us a hair flip. She didn't, but she was very close to doing it. Right? It was down to the side. She was looking to give it a hair flip, and I was waiting for it. But again, I'm glad that there has been that example already. Brandy L has commented and said, "And that's what I love about you, Reverend Erica Nicole Bailey. Nikki Bailey. You are so approachable and easy to talk to or talked up." I'm not too sure which one she was going with, Brandy L. But I guess that, you know,
Thank you, Brandy. Thank you so much.
Eric Anthony has a question for us. He says, "Is it true more women are entering seminary than men now?"
Yes, that is true.
So.
Wow, really?
That's true. Yes.
So it seems to be a shift, if you will, or in the dynamic of who's entering in and who's responsible for delivering the word, if you will.
Yes.
And I think that is a shift. I think, again, going back to my sister who says, this is who I am. This is who God has called me to be. Move out of the way. We're here to take our place. We're here to take our rightful place with whom we have been called to be. No apologies necessary. Yeah. You know, I think that's the shift that we're seeing.
Yeah. And I think that is the shift there. It is they're unapologetic.
Unapologetic is what we're saying.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But yes.
Whereas in the past, we've tended to shift, just kind of shy away. I think I mentioned to you, Rick, when we were talking on the phone that a lot of people, especially spouses who are in the ministry, there's a decision. Like, for instance, my husband is in the ministry, he's licensed and ordained, and I'm in the ministry. So do we serve together in the same church, or will I pastor somewhere else in another fold and he pastors at a different church? Where for me, I have chosen and will continue to choose to pastor with my husband. Some women coming into the ministry fully believe that God has called them to pastor at a totally different location, and their husband pastors at a different location. Well, it's all about who God has called them to be. For me, I'll stay, and unless God tells me to go somewhere else. But some women have said, no, God has given me full ordination, full call to pastor, not co-pastor, not serve as an associate, but to pastor my own congregation. And so that's a shift. We haven't seen that in the past. So,
well, it looks like it might be coming up on the horizon here as our community, our society continues to progress, advance, and in different manners of thinking tend to or maybe coming in to the mindset. Speaking of women doing dynamic things, have you all seen A Wrinkle in Time yet?
What is it?
A Wrinkle in Time?
No, I haven't seen it.
Oh, okay.
Have you? No, I haven't seen it.
No, not yet.
Black Panther, though.
I was gonna say, are we in Wakanda? Right. Okay. Right. We're in Wakanda.
Yes.
Well,
and interestingly enough, when I stand up, we do the call to worship every Sunday. But ever since I watched Black Panther, my whole presentation in that pulpit has changed. It has given me a courage. I'm like, because the sisters represented in that movie were so strong. And so there might be times where I'm standing and my knees are knocking, but you have to come across as being very confident. I can literally think back to the sisters, particularly Denai in that movie, and I am strengthened because of how they were portrayed in that movie. If they can do it, I know I can do it. I'm a bad chick because I'm Black Panther. Yes, and so that resonates in my mind on a Sunday morning as I'm standing in that pulpit. Wakanda forever.
Wakanda forever.
All right.
We got the shoulders going on Challenge Day. We got the ladies in here talking about women in ministry here in Rick's Room on IntellectualRadio.com. Give us a call, comment here on Facebook, 708-223-8953. We're having a good time. Now, while we're talking about Wakanda going on in Wakanda, we got school walkouts taking place in our community. But before I get into that, I want to ask, are you ladies, how are you, or are you involved in the primary elections coming up? Are you talking to your congregations about them? And what has that looked like for you in your position?
In my position, I have not been involved in it. We have our head trustee. He's an attorney, Rodney Howard, and he handles all of that. And so we just had Souls to the Polls that took place at our church. So we had buses come to our church for the last 2 Sundays where they were taking members of our congregation and taking them actually to the polls to vote and then bringing them back to the church. And that was for the past 2 Sundays. And so he's really politically involved, and he handles all that for us. And so we have him as a representative from our church who does that for us. And so, yeah, he does that for our congregation.
Anyone else?
Our immediate congregation, I'm not really involved in anything political in our immediate congregation. But the Woman of God's Design, we have a whole social justice arm of our ministry where we are the advocates. We are going to Springfield, going to Washington, D.C., fighting for the rights of our people. We've had conversation, and we'll be having more conversation about the candidates coming up. So that's kind of how I involve myself in that area.
Nice. It sounds like we might have. No, okay, we don't. All right. Thanks. Appreciate that. But y'all don't see it, Mr. Earl back there making sure we sound good and taking care of all of the things that go on behind the scenes. Thanks so much, Earl. With the political climate that we're in, and the shifts that we are seeing, whether it be in religion, in politics, or just across the board, the strides in history that's being made. We talked about more women, in seminary, entering into the seminary. Excuse me. Are you all seeing opportunities, and maybe through your own organizations, where you're finding your position in ministry is helping women find their way and their place within society and within communities?
I think
Go ahead.
The very example of seeing women actually moving and being in ministry is encouragement to younger women coming up saying that, yes, I can do this. Yes, I am part of this. And actually having that strong base as to say, I am a minister. I am called of God and I can do this. And it's not about you and your opinion, but it's about me and my relationship with God. I think the more that we see women in ministry and the more we see women taking that strong stance,
Sure.
like your sister,
Mhm.
it'll be encouraging to others to take their stand as well.
Gotcha. If I can have one of you hit the on button there for me on that phone. We have a caller that's joining us. Go ahead, hit on. Thank you so much for calling into IntellectualRadio.com. This is Rick in Rick's room. Who are we speaking to today?
This is Nikki's mother.
Hi, Mom.
Oh, wow. So we have Nikki's mother calling in.
Hi, Mom.
Hi, baby.
Yeah, you're on live.
Yeah, you're
No,
on live with us.
That's the baby girl.
Okay.
That's the baby of the family.
Tell us how it's been for you in supporting your daughter in ministry.
I am so proud of her. I can't believe it. She was the worst child I had.
Oh,
And look how God turned her out.
thank you, Mom.
She had a praying grandmother.
You're right there by the button. So would that be
Holy
great?
Ghost,
Right.
the Holy Ghost. May we start interceding. Thank you, Mom. That means so much to me.
She couldn't contact her grandmother from 11 a.m. to 3.
She
She had to watch
soap
soap.
operas.
Her grandmother had to watch the soap.
Well, thank you for
Thank
praying,
you so
Mom. Thank
much.
you for calling in. I love you.
Love you more.
Okay.
All right, take
bye.
care.
Oh my God.
We are making stars all day long here at IntellectualRadio.com in Rick's room. If your family wants to call in, go ahead and give us a call. 708-223-8953 as well. And you know what? But that's important, right? That's really great to have. When we talked about earlier, women having issues with women, you could potentially have in your own family, right? Your maternal figure. I know, like women, mother-daughter relationships aren't always the best, right?
Sure.
And it's always could be a struggle. So to have your mother that's supporting you as well is awesome. That I'm glad to hear. Listen, let me take a moment here and talk about real quick that our show this evening is also being brought to you by my good friend, Mr. Eric Lane, agent with New York Life. It takes more than good grades to get into college. It takes parents who plan ahead. So join Agent Eric Lane for a complimentary college funding seminar, courtesy of New York Life, tomorrow, Thursday, March 15th at 6:30 p.m., located at the Center on Halsted, 3656 North Halsted Street, Chicago, Illinois. There's absolutely no cost or obligation to attend, and any information that you receive is free. I'll say that again. Any information that you receive is free. That's free information about college funding and planning. So reservations are required. Give them a call, 617-901-9460, or shoot them an email at elane, Layne, at ft.newyorklife.com. You can go to Rick's Room on my Facebook page for the additional contact details as well. So we're talking about women in ministry this evening in Rick's Room on IntellectualRadio.com. Again, we appreciate your comments. Keep them going. We have a couple of other comments that have come up as well. Eric, and that's Eric Anthony, ladies and gentlemen, that we were just talking about. Go ahead and click on his name so you can get some information about that college funding. Has the hashtag #MeToo movement had any effect on your ministries? And that could be within the church as well as the organizations, ladies, that you have outside of the church. Has that been an impact for you?
That one has had a huge impact on my ministry. I have written a book called I Survived, and I wrote the book it came out in May of 2017. And in that book, I talk about some of the issues that I dealt with when growing up. I talked about childhood sexual abuse and some of the things that I talked about. Again, it was a precursor to the Me Too movement. After that came out, that's when all the Me Too stuff started coming out. And so when I wrote the book and released it, I knew it could go one of two ways. I knew that it could further stigmatize me as talking about some of the issues that were really, really personal. I wrote it because I knew that there were other victims out there who had dealt with some of the things that I had dealt with, but I wanted them to know that God still loved them and that God could still use them and that there was still purpose for them and that they could overcome some of those things. And the response was wonderful. But then right after that, the whole Me Too movement came out. And then people were saying, oh, my God, me too. And so it was a tremendous, almost validation for what I had been through. And so imagine, if you will, walking around in shame for 20 plus years. And then after that, it's almost like when the women came out with the whole Me Too validation, for lack of a better word, it was like, we're all in this together. So it was a tremendous
opportunity
to connect with women. It was you are not alone. And as a result, that is how I connected with Reverend Lisa. And she has now, we work together in her ministry in Joliet and ministering to women at the domestic violence shelter, because we are now collaborating together, and the strength of both of our voices and sharing with other women and saying that me too, and you're not alone. And if God did it for me and healed some of those scars, he'll do the same thing for you. So it's really been a blessing, and it has enhanced the work that God has already called us to do. So
yeah, I would say, for me, I've been working with women in domestic violence situations for 15 years now. So the movement, I mean, we've kind of like already been in that movement. So for me, it really hasn't changed much, because I've been dealing with women for over 15 years that have been victims and been victimized, and ministering to those, broken women. So for me, it really hasn't changed much. So not with my ministry wise, I should say. Yes.
How about you, Karen? With your organization, how was that affected or impacted yours?
I had been hearing the stories all along. So for them to say me too, I was like, okay.
Right. Yeah, right.
My ministry is the Woman of God's Design. So dealing with young women and even older women, even hearing them talk about their stories and share their stories and sharing my story, it was just like, okay, thank you all for actually saying it. So,
and that with the hashtag Me Too, but just sexual abuse or I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank on the professional term for when it happens in the workplace, but thank you. Sexual.
Yeah,
know what happened there? I need another one. So when you have the topics of sexual harassment that are coming up and the effect that it has been having on women, the outspokenness and the movement for that, I'm glad to see that you all have the engagements for and opportunities for women to come and speak to you as a woman. Let me ask you, how has your ministry, your organization, well, your organizations are specific for women, but how has your ministry within the church been, and maybe an open door or an opportunity for men to be able to, have these, meaningful discussions, be receptive to your position and change their lives in a sense, if you will? What has that impact been like throughout your position for men?
I was really surprised. I have to be honest. I probably shouldn't have been, but I was really surprised to get the feedback that I've received from men, because my target audience were women. But the feedback and the inboxes and the phone calls that I've received from men have been very overwhelming. And for them to be able to find their voice and say, me too, that was surprising for me. But it was refreshing for me. And for them to be able to say this gave them courage to tell their story, number one, and then to also reach out to get some professional help. Because it's one thing to say me too, but then there's another thing to say, I need to get some help to address these issues and to put some of these things to rest. That is very powerful. That's very meaningful. For so long, it's like you have a gag order. You can't speak. You can't find the words to even articulate the pain that you have experienced. But to be able to say, okay, I found the courage to find my voice, and then to say there's help available, then to say there's somebody who's actually going to listen to me, to actually validate me. And then, that meant something to me. And so for the men to be able to reach out and say, I have kept this stuff inside for years. Thank you for saying something, because now I feel like I can have a voice. That's tremendous. That is tremendous. So, yeah.
I'm glad that there is that, opportunity, because I feel like with guys, speaking from my own personal experience, I'll say there's you like as a man to have another man to talk to about some things, but there are things that you get, this goes professionally as well as spiritually. There are things that there are affirmations that you get from a man, but there are certain affirmations that you receive from a woman. There are certain things that are easier to discuss, if you will, with it being a woman. And I think that particularly that's a provision that's allowed when you have a woman in a ministerial position. I wish the Catholics would catch up to. I don't know where they're doing out there. Some of the other religions, but
I would say though, at the church that I'm at now, I'm not on the ministerial staff there, but the apostle there, he really takes those issues head on. So, he was molested, and he's very open about that. And so he makes it an environment so that men, I mean, this is the first time I've ever seen, like men, the way they come up and they, deal with the fact that they have been victimized, and they feel that they're in an environment that they can express that. It's the first church I've ever been in like that, and he even deals with sexual abuse in church, which you don't really hear about. It goes on. I mean, we've been in church long enough to know, it goes on. You hear it behind the scenes.
Does it really?
Yeah, a lot. And no one
y'all didn't see Reverend Karen just turn around.
And no one addresses it, but he's like one of the first pastors that I've ever seen that, addresses it openly.
Yes, he does.
So.
Well, I'll definitely have to check that out. It's good to hear that there are not only churches and pastors, but denominations that are allowing and that are open and receptive to that conversation being had and taking place.
Yes.
Last thing I'm wondering, ladies, before we kind of wrap up here, still got a little time though. When we talk about the obstacles and challenges that you've faced, do you feel like now that where you are in your positions, you have your ministerial position that you've been in, your leadership position, that you've been in, you have your organization that you've started, that's doing great. How often do you still find the need to defend your position and what you have going on? Is it still a thing this far into your career? Is it still something that you find yourself defending?
Well, if I allowed it, I would defend it, or would be in a position to defend it.
What do you mean?
Because there are still those who still have those beliefs that women shouldn't be in ministry, women shouldn't be in leadership. But for me, it's not a conversation anymore. That's your belief. I'm not going to argue with you. And if I say anything, it's something like Scripture says, in him there's neither Jew nor Greek, male nor female.
Sure.
So are you looking at my flesh, or are you looking at spirit when you say I shouldn't be in leadership? And I leave it at that. I no longer argue the case, because I know who I am and I know whose I am, and here I am.
Just in case y'all missed, as my pastor said, your shouting cue, that was one of them. Right there. And if you do have hair to flip it, flip it. That's where that goes, right?
Right.
Ladies, Erica or at least Rita, you all still find opportunities that you have to defend your position?
I think for me, I don't have to defend it anymore, because for a long time, I thought that I had to do it in a certain way. I thought that I was pastor's wife. I thought that I was an ordained minister, and I thought that I had to do it in this traditional way. Since then, God has freed me. God has freed me to just be me. God has freed me to follow the ministry that he has given specifically to me. And this ministry feels very genuine in connecting with people and serving people and being vulnerable with people and being transparent with people and in offering people healing the way that God has offered it to me. And that is what feels meaningful. And so I don't feel like I have to defend that to anybody. Whereas in the past, where I felt like I had to dot all my I's and cross all my T's and say all my Hail Marys and say the 10 Commandments and read the discipline, and I'm going to give away the denomination if I keep on, so I'm going to leave that alone. But this one is authentic, and this one is God-given. And so I'm flowing and functioning in that. And so I'm like you, I'm not defending anything, because it's all between me and him. And so if you can't get with that, take it up with him.
I mean, I would say ditto and ditto.
Not anymore.
Not anymore. I think I've just been in it, so long, and my relationship with God has just
Yeah.
grown to the point
Yeah.
that, I've risen above it.
Yeah.
Kind of like the perspective of the eagle.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That eagle, when they understand their strengths and that they don't have to fight on the level of their enemies, they can fly above it.
Yeah.
And when they try to come behind them, they just choke off and die to the
Yeah.
enemy. So yeah, I've just learned to rise above it. I don't feel the need to have to
Absolutely.
justify that
Yeah.
God has called me.
Yeah.
I just feel a need to walk in that calling
Just walk
and to
in.
glorify God.
Yeah. Yeah.
Shauna Renee Moore says that's true. The topic of sexual abuse very seldom comes up in the pulpit. Eric Anthony, wow, yes, that was deep. Brandy L, yes, you are genuine. And Linnell Floral, I think it is. You are all blessings, and I
Thank you
agree.
so
I agree,
much.
ladies.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
so
I have to wrap up and say, but thank you so much for your time today, sharing your opinions, your perspective, and the things the challenges that you face, and the strides that you all are making in religion. I'm so grateful for the things that you have done, are doing, and will do, and the time that you've spent here with me on the show. Thanks so much to all of our sponsors as well. And listen, all of you all here following us on Facebook, share the video on your page. Let your friends and your followers, your family, take a listen, take a view, and participate in the conversation as well. Next week, we're going to be talking to a few of my sorors from the lovely organization of Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated. Watch it. She was a Delta, right? She's a Delta. We're not worried about that. But we're going to talk to some of my great sorors of Zeta Phi Beta and talking about some of the organizations, the women in organizations that will be making impacts within the community. We're going to try to get some ladies of the law enforcement too as well on that show. So make sure you tune in next week on the show. Remember, if you do have a show topic, would like to be a guest or advertise your business, go ahead and email me at ricksroom2@gmail.com. That's RIXROOM, the number 2 at gmail.com. Remember, you can download the iHeartRadio app or find us on iTunes under the podcast section. Just search for Intellectual Radio Talk and find all the shows of the Intellectual Radio family. Special thanks to my good friend and one-man production crew, Al Young Enterprises, for producing Rick's Room, providing resources for performance and production engagements, artistic development, personal image consulting, and if you're hungry, he has just launched his catering business. That is Eat by IMAY Roman numeral 3. That's EAT, everything Al touches, by IMAY3. Contact Al at 773-220-9869 or shoot him an email at alyoung Roman numeral 3 at me.com. For those of you that don't know that Roman numeral 3 is 3 I's. I. Some people don't know that, but that's what Roman numeral 3 is. But give them a call, Al Young Enterprises. Whatever you do it with passion. Next on Intellectual Radio, tune in to my girl Dana being Dana. She has the Narcissist Show. She has a special guest, Nikki from the Hit Bravo show To Rome for Love will be on her show. So tune in, check her out. Thank y'all for listening. It's time to get out of the room. Leave. Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Glasses are tingling, champagne I'm sipping, VIP I'm sitting in, the whole club's rocking, everybody's watching.